This tale belongs to a horse named Keiko. This is her story. She was my friend, and I couldn't save her. It is one of the most magical and transformative experiences of my life with horses, and it ended badly. A few house rules. We do not shame owners who reach out for help, and although there are many situations I've been involved in that stir a desire in you for justice and punishment, it has always been my policy at Dreaming Fields to help the animals rather than punish the humans. Keiko's story began when I met her mother. Her name is Foxy, and she was a chestnut mare, an appendix, which is half thoroughbred, half quarter horse. I met her for the first time when I was scribing at a show, along with my friend and boss at Horse Lovers, who was judging. She, along with several other horses in the show that day, belonged to a co-worker and friend of ours. My boss and I had traveled from Pennsylvania and Ohio, respectively, to West Virginia to judge and scribe for her. We noticed Foxy right away. Her Freeze brand is distinctive, and her winning the barrels bareback with a kid was a big plus. Super versatile, she did multiple events, English, Western, jumping, and on the flat with multiple kids. You can tell she was really sweet, but if I'm being honest, you could tell she was too thin to be competing that hard. You see, on the mountain, hothouse flowers and hard keepers who need extra tending do not thrive, and even though she was half quarter horse, she had a more thoroughbred metabolism. I came to know her better later. I returned to West Virginia 2 weeks later to teach crafts at horse camp for my friend, and I got to know all of the horses in her herd by name and personality, and I was close friends with several of them by the end of that first year of camp. Pendleton County, West Virginia is poor, and horses are expensive. The level of care, the veterinary technology available, and the equipment being used were all below what I am accustomed to considering a minimum standard. As was my usual preference, I chose to help and try to elevate their situation. The next year, I returned to teach at camp with a car packed full of tack, a first aid kit for humans and for horses, my farrier kit to trim feet, and anything else I could think of to help my human and horse friends. That second year was 2019. We had fewer campers, and I was able to join in and ride in the lessons in the first week morning session. I'd had some bad wrecks jumping in the past, and I was terrified of doing it, and still even a little bit anxious cantering sometimes. I bonded with my camp kiddos over my being afraid and working through it and doing it anyway and being brave. And I rode Foxy. She took me soft and sweet to the right spot of every jump every time. Soft mouth, well-trained, smooth as a hunter pony. Over the course of that week, she erased so much fear for me. The picture of me and her jumping together at camp, even though the fence is tiny, is still one of my favorites. Also in 2019, my friend bought a Percheron stud colt at an auction in Ohio, brought him home and turned him out with her mares, and later with whatever assorted mares people would give to her for free or sell to her for cheap. He came home in October, and by spring, Foxy was pregnant. As we return to the story, as everyone knows, 2020 brought COVID. COVID canceled camp, and camp never came back, so I didn't make the trip down to West Virginia as often. I know these parts of the story from my camp kids who stayed in touch and from following Facebook updates. Breeding horses is not for the faint of heart. Horses, when they're not breeding, are as suicidal and incredibly fragile animals. Add in foaling and the astronomical list of things that can go wrong are not all foreseeable or preventable. What is foreseeable and preventable is twins. Unlike most other animals, twins in horses is not a cause for celebration. Horses are not designed to carry multiples, and very rarely do both survive to term. Not only is it common for a mare to abort early when carrying twins, but quite a few mares lose their lives in the attempt to birth them as well. For that reason, it is standard in horses to have an ultrasound done early in pregnancy to confirm the pregnancy, and a second ultrasound done some 30 or 40 days later to check for twins, and if twins are present, to reduce the pregnancy to a singleton. I do not know if it was because of the lack of technology or because of the lack of resources. The local small animal vet does not even own an X-ray machine, and there is only one equine vet for 3 or 4 counties. I don't know if the reason matters or the excuse matters, but the owner decided to skip the expense of that second ultrasound. And once the mares were confirmed in full, she just turned them out and let them go up on the mountain. The gamble paid off with most of them. Of the 3 who were pregnant that year, 2 foaled uneventfully. And Foxy Foxy had twins. The smaller colt, Arjun, the larger filly, Caterly, were both alive when they were born, which is a bit of a miracle. And Foxy survived their birth, which is a bigger miracle, especially in the condition that she was in the photos posted publicly. She was thinner pregnant than she was when she was showing when I met her. The owner posted a Facebook status, surprised and excited about the twins, and most of us were quietly horrified. But it got worse. If a baby horse doesn't get enough colostrum in the first 24 hours of life, they will not have an adequate immune system. They can easily get a blood infection that can spread to joints and destroy them. Because of that huge risk, it's very important that a new baby horse is examined by a vet within the first 24 hours of their life who can do a snap test to see if they received enough colostrum. If they didn't, they will need a plasma transfusion or they will not have an immune system. Guess who didn't get the snap test? Neither baby could stand or nurse without help. So my two camp kids, teenagers, who were only teenagers at that point, moved into the stall and lived with mom and baby 24/7, getting up every 2 hours to lift the baby up to nurse. The filly Caterly grew stronger and fairly convinced that she was half human. Arjun got sick, and when it became clear that it was really bad, his owner raised a bunch of money on a GoFundMe, hospitalized him at Virginia Tech, spent almost $10,000, and euthanized him anyway. Caterly lived. Foxy did not catch when put back out with the stallion that year, so she did not have a baby in 2021. In 2022, Foxy gave birth to Keiko after an uneventful and carefully attended pregnancy and birth. In 2022, we made the trip down in February to pick up and bring home another horse I met during camp, Suki. We were only there for a few hours because we had to be back for work, but I got to visit with all of my friends in the herd and meet the previous year's babies and see this year's mare's big bellies, but it was too early for them to have been born yet. The next couple of years I didn't make it down again, and the herd quietly grew and multiplied. And in 2023, Foxy gave birth to a colt named Cordo. In early 2024, I was invited to work the horse expo circuit, and I offered to drive down and pick up one of my camp girls to work with me. In the time since I'd last seen the herd, the oldest of the babies had turned 4. The youngest was about 4 weeks, and there were 16 of them, about half with umbilical hernias and one with an ear tooth. All at least half Percheron, mostly thoroughbred for the other half, but some quarter horse, and a rogue epicross mare, too old to breed on purpose, jumped in and turned up at breakfast one morning with a surprise colt. The older ones had more handling and were haltered at some point. Several of the younger ones had essentially not been touched since they were born. All of them were varying degrees of wild. While I was there, my friend asked if I would come and halter break them so she could sell them. And I said, yes, of course, I'll come and help, and decided that I would bring one of the babies home with me, although I would not know who until I worked with them and got to know them better. She was upfront that she couldn't afford to pay me what I normally charge to train, and I was upfront that I expected to get some store credit for a baby, but I also expected to give her money as well. So I started going down for a week or 10 days at a time, about once a month, all spring, summer, fall of that year. I started with the younger babies and worked my way up using the clicker training, teaching leading, brushing, tying, picking up feet. At the same time, my camp kid and the owner were working on starting the 4-year-olds under saddle, so I got to know them fairly well. Caterly at that point was 4, and Caterly is a pest. Caterly learned how to click my clicker with her mouth and demand a treat. Caterly likes to sneak up behind me in the field and use my treat pouch strap to lift me off the ground. It was the beginning of August, and as I was driving back down, I got a text message asking if I would mind when I got there helping go and get a horse back in. That year was a terrible drought, and there was little to no water in the creek and not much grass on the mountain. The horses pushed through fencing and got on the neighbor's property to try and raid their cattle's food and water. She said the whole herd had gotten out, but she'd already gone up to the top of the mountain and gotten everyone back home except for Donnie. Stupid Donnie wouldn't come when she called. He was behind a gate. So she asked if I would help her ride up with a halter and lead and bring him back down. She doesn't really like him. She didn't get him on purpose. Someone gave her a mare and required her to take him to take the mare. He's a 7-year-old thoroughbred who was born with a swayback. He's never been ridden or tattooed, but he has a microchip, so she didn't feel like she could send him to an auction. So he has stayed and just sort of lived out in the herd without much handling or interaction. She would love to give him away to a new home. Of course I will help. I got there, we talked, my ride visited with the horses, and then headed back home. We went to tack up for the ride up the mountain. I looked over and I said, "Isn't that Donnie right there, though?" So who is it that is stuck? It has to be one of the 3-year-olds, because I would have noticed if one of my friends failed to greet me when I came in. And if it's Black, then it's Keiko. It was probably 2.5 or 3 hours after I arrived that we finally headed up the mountain. It was not clear at what point the horses had gotten on the neighbor's land, because the owner had been out of town for the weekend, so it could have been up to 3 days by the time we got to her. At that time, I had not yet handled the 3-year-olds, essentially at all. They had met me at some point in passing, but I had not laid hands on her. We rode up, I got down, opened the gate, called her, and she didn't come. I looked closer, and I saw why. She was wrapped up in an old downed barbed wire fence. Both hind legs were tied together with 3 loops of barbed wire. They were so tight you couldn't see the wire, and they were so swollen. She couldn't move more than a few feet. She's eaten everything she could reach and kicked up dust. There'd been no water. She'd never been haltered past newborn. She'd never been handled. I examined the situation carefully and said there was absolutely no way I could get her out without bolt cutters. So I stayed with her and tied my horse to a tree nearby to help keep her calm while the owner rode back down the mountain to get the bolt cutters and brought them to me. While I was waiting, I used every single hay pellet and treat in my clicker pouch, every ounce of ability to communicate with horses and work with horses that I have, and every single prayer I know how to pray to every god I've ever heard of. How am I going to get her out without her shredding herself and without her killing me? I took pictures and video to show to the vet that I was still telling myself was going to come, so that they would know exactly how she was stuck and how bad it was. After it was over, I showed the video to my assistant trainer. The first thing she said was that she could hear in my voice how afraid I was. I tried not to let it show. After about 30 minutes, the owner returned with bolt cutters, took my gelding's reins so I could attempt to free Keiko.
All right, Keiko, good girl. I need you to be very brave. We're gonna get you loose. I need you to be very brave. Okay, Keiko? We're gonna get you loose. You have to be very brave.
When the owner got back to us, I had already formed the beginnings of a plan. Her legs were tied together almost like hobbles, but she was also tied to the fence with a long strand of barb trailing her. My biggest fear, other than her kicking and shredding herself and potentially killing me, was that if I got her part of the way loose and she tried to walk or thrash, she could do fatal damage to herself in seconds. So I had to free her in a way that she wouldn't be free until it was safe for her to move. I follow a really active technical large animal emergency rescue group on Facebook, and I've done a lot of extra research on my own about how to deal with emergencies with very large animals. This is not the first time I've had to enter a dangerous situation to help an animal in need by far, but it was one of the most terrifying. So the plan was to cut the wire so that her 2 legs were no longer tied to each other, and then quickly snap the long wire so she was no longer tied to the fence. Then I felt like I should be able to guide her down the mountain, still wearing the wire as though it was bracelets embedded in her poor leg. She stood like a statue. She didn't try to get away from me. She didn't try to kick. I think she knew that I was trying to help. I was able to communicate that much to her, at least. 3 or 4 snips, and her legs were no longer tied to each other. Another snip, and she was loose. I could not lead her down the mountain, and I needed her to go down the mountain to the riding ring where I could keep her contained and off of the 84 acres that the herd roams. Even though we brought a halter and lead rope up the mountain with us, she'd never worn one, and she didn't know what it means, and it wouldn't have been a help. So I asked the owner to pony my horse down the mountain while I followed behind, guiding Keiko. We had to go through the gate she was stuck behind, across the neighbor's field, through another gate onto the property she belonged on, all the way down the mountain, through another gate into the ring. I walked behind her, and when she got off track, I changed my body position to push her in the direction I needed her to go. Between my following and the owner leading, we were able to walk her directly down to the ring. Now I have to get the wire off, and it is so, so tight. Even if the vet is coming, I still need to get the wire off now. It is so tight that it's cut off circulation for who knows how long and has done who knows how much pressure damage. Owner had some ACE, so she gave her a shot of ACE IM. It helped her relax a bit and tolerate the pain she was in, I'm sure, but since neither of us can give an IV shot, it was not hugely sedating. We put a halter on her and a lead so we at least had something to hold on to. But really, what happened next was about Keiko, about how incredibly special she was. As I started in working with the bolt cutters, a few of the loops were pretty loose and came off quickly. Working carefully, talking to her while her owner held the lead rope, it did not take me all that long to cut and peel all but one loop out. But that one loop was so tight and her leg was so swollen that I didn't see any way I could cut it without cutting her skin. There was a short piece trapped underneath that tight piece, which I'd already cut off. I was able to grab that piece with the cutters and pull, which caused the other side to dig into her leg more, but gave me a little bit of working room. But it took 3 hands, one to hold the wire out and the others to cut it. I said another prayer because I was out of ideas and I needed some help. And I realized that my clicker bag, which was still around my waist, had a really small snap on the removable strap. And if I pulled hard enough on that loose piece, I thought maybe I could get the clip clipped around that tight band of wire, strangling her leg. So that's what I did. It had to have been incredibly painful. There wasn't much room and I had to pull hard, but she stood and she let me. I wrapped the strap between my knees and around my legs so I could use my legs to hold the tension and my hands to cut. I got it all off, which was a little bit of a miracle. Now that the wire was gone, I could see more of the damage, and honestly, if you don't know what you're looking at, it didn't look that bad. The skin was only broken in a tiny place, and all of the swelling was huge, but she was walking pretty well. If you know about pressure damage, that's deceptive. The owner let me know that she'd called the vet, and he said she could stop by his office in town and pick up some SMZs and a tetanus shot. I was shocked and not happy. I directly told her that if this horse was in one of my clients' barns, she would be in a trailer on her way to be hospitalized at the state veterinary hospital. And if she was in my barn, she would already be on her way to my vet, who may still have sent me to the state veterinary hospital. I told her then, this is a life-threatening emergency for Keiko. If the pressure of those wires being so tight for potentially days has killed off the cells under them, we could lose her. And SMZs don't penetrate into the legs well at all. Even if we are going to do an antibiotic, that one doesn't make sense. But it wasn't my horse. It wasn't my call. The only thing I could do was take the best care of her that I could with the resources I had, inadequate though they were. I cold hosed her leg and put ointment in the wound. I had SMZs, silver honey cream, Manuka honey, and that was it. Leaving her confined in the ring, the owner headed to town to pick up a tetanus shot and the SMZ tabs. After she got back, I prepared some sweet feed with dissolved SMZs mixed in, because most horses are difficult to feed medicine. It doesn't usually taste great. When I walked out to feed it to her, she was laying down, and for a moment I was a little concerned, but it looked like she was just resting, so I walked up just to see if she would let me come join her. We like it when they let us lay down with them, but it doesn't happen very often, even with our tame horses. It requires a lot of trust, because it's a vulnerable position for a prey animal to be in. Not only did she not get up as I approached, she was happy for me to sit down beside her, and she ate her food without ever getting up. I figured she was just exhausted and in pain and didn't want to spend the extra energy to get back up again. I sat with her until the sun set, and then I went to bed. The next morning, I fed and medicated her again. I cold hosed her leg, packed her wounds with ointment. She allowed me to do all of that without struggling or complaining in any way and without being restrained. When I led her to the hose to hose her legs off, she appeared to be entirely halter trained. I went about my tasks of the day, and when time came to feed and medicate her in the evening, she was up when I walked out. And when she saw me coming, she nickered, and then she laid down and invited me to sit beside her. Every time she saw me or heard my voice, she whinnied. Every evening, she joined me to lay down and cuddle and watch the sunset. And every day, I, along with other horse friends of the owners, advocated for her to be seen and at least an ultrasound done to evaluate the tendons and ligaments in the worst leg. By the 3rd day, it was very swollen, but also starting to seep, and the front of her hoof was unstable and flopping, and she didn't want to bear weight on it in a way that made me very concerned for her front extensor tendon. But she was cooperative. She was easy for me to doctor. She was mobile. She was up and walking on it. Even if that ligament is destroyed, as long as the more important ones in the rear part of the leg were mainly intact, she still had a decent chance to heal. One of the other fillies came in off the mountain with a serious laceration, so we treated her and turned her out in the ring along with Keiko.
Carmen watched Keiko come lay down and me come and sit next to her and decided that was what she was supposed to do too, and she came and laid on the other side of me. It was a really special experience to lay in a puppy pile of baby draft horses, but also a little bit intimidating. But I had a deadline. I had an abscessed tooth. I was in terrible pain, and I had a dentist appointment back in Ohio to take care of it. I was terrified to leave her, but I could not stay. I rearranged my schedule frantically so that I would be gone the shortest amount of time possible. Rather than a month later, I returned in 10 days. I was afraid that no one else would be able to doctor it multiple times a day, both because she seemed to trust me and allow me to do a lot more than she would allow her owner or the camp kiddo, and also because, well, her owner didn't seem to be treating it as a serious injury the way I felt it needed to be treated. We brought her in off the mountain on the 6th of August. On the 12th, I was back in Ohio. On the 25th, I was back in West Virginia, afraid of what I was going to find when I saw Keiko again.
I made the 6.5-hour drive down on a Sunday, and on my way I got another text. Hey, when you get there, could you check Keiko's leg? She's out with the herd, and when I saw her Friday as I was leaving town, it looked like she was walking funny. What? Turned out in the herd? Checked on only from a distance? Left alone all weekend? Walking funny? Walking worse? When I pulled in, she was partway up the mountain in the small paddock. When she realized it was me, she whinnied and brought herself down to the gate. I grabbed her and checked her wounds. Fuck. Proud flesh we can deal with. The pus and drainage from the infection flushed out well with the cold hose, and she let me dig my fingers all the way into the holes in her legs to treat her. The holes are deeper than my knuckles, and now the leg won't hold her in a different, wobbly way that makes me worried about the flexor tendon and suspensory ligaments. I sent pictures and video to her owner along with the direct statement that she absolutely has to be seen by somebody with an ultrasound machine and better antibiotics that can actually perfuse into the leg. When her owner received the picture, she freaked out. She said it didn't look that bad the last time she checked it, and finally made an appointment for later in the week with the new horse vet in town. We're using in town loosely. It was 2 mountains and a 2.5-hour haul away. But praise be, this vet owns an ultrasound and an x-ray machine and graduated from veterinary school within the last quarter century, and so should be up to date on treatments in a way that the old country vet is clearly not. We also made an appointment for Foxy's colt, Cordeaux, because he needs his umbilical hernia fixed and to be gelded. I had convinced my partner in crime, Mike, to purchase Cordeaux because I was pretty sure if I didn't get him off the mountain soon, he was going to die. He was thin and weak and just didn't look right, and when the day dawned for the veterinary appointment, his eyes were swollen almost shut and weeping. So, I have 2 unhandled babies who have never seen a trailer before, who need to be loaded and hauled 2.5 hours each way through the mountains. So we spent the next couple of days on loading practice. Cordeaux figured it out very quickly. Most horses who've never had a bad experience in a trailer will walk right into one until they realize that it moves and should be scary. So him being a green baby who had never left his place of birth made it easier in some ways. Keiko was different. My camp kid tried to lead her over to me, which is when I finally realized that she was not halter broke. She just followed me. When the kid tried to lead her, or my partner tried to lead her, or her owner tried to lead her, she planted her feet and acted like the unhandled baby that she actually was. She walked for me. I tried to lead her up into the trailer, and she walked with me until she reached the ramp. When she put her front feet on the ramp, her injured rear had to take the extra weight, and the bad leg buckled under her. She fell. She caught herself partway down and looked at me and said, "I'll try." And I said, "No, she can't do it. That means on vet day, we're just going to have to put her on the trailer however we can get her on the trailer. And it's going to be ugly. But there's no way I can teach her to load because she's not physically able to do what I'm asking her to do." Every time she saw me for the rest of the week, she came to the gate. Every time she heard me, she whinnied for me. Every day we spent time in close connection. And every day we counted down until vet day. Vet day, August 28th. Getting her on the trailer was ugly. I was inside the trailer holding her lead rope, encouraging her to come in to me, which means I couldn't see everything that happened.
It was a matter of life or death. She had to get on the trailer and go to the vet. So her owner beat her on with the whip until she leaped almost into my arms. She made the drive well. We didn't have any trouble getting there. When we arrived, we unloaded them and then realized the vet was running behind schedule. We ended up sitting outside in the grass, hand-grazing both babies for close to an hour before it was our turn. It was incredibly hot, and there was not a lot of shade, and at the time I was a little bit annoyed that I had to sit out there for so long, because even though her owner looked at me on the way to the vet and said, "I'm afraid they're going to tell me to put her down," I didn't believe it would go that way. She was too special. She was too bonded with me. She was too easy to take care of. I didn't think she would ever be sound enough to ride, but that doesn't matter to me. I do Liberty. I hardly ever ride anymore. So long as she could be pasture sound, she had a home for life with me already. I wish now I'd taken more pictures. I wish I had been more present in the moment that last hour. But I never could have imagined what we would find out. Finally, it was our turn to go in. What do I say? I need to convince this vet that I know what I'm talking about and they should listen to me. I need to communicate to them that I am not the cause of this situation and I'm trying to help. And I need to do all of it without making the owner, who is my friend, feel bad or feel worse anyway. Vet began by examining Cordo. We didn't even get as far as the umbilical hernia because the first thing she caught was his eyes being swollen. Looking closely in them, she diagnosed him with uveitis in both eyes. He was already nearly blind in one and would likely lose all vision in the other as well. What causes uveitis in both eyes in a yearling? Considering his extremely poor body condition and his temperature, she ran a test which confirmed he is infected with leptospirosis. After questioning the owner pretty sharply about it, we discovered that she was not aware that a vaccine existed for lepto, and none of the horses in the herd have been vaccinated for it. They gave us medicine, drops for both eyes, pain meds, and a treatment plan to take him home and see what we could get. If Mike had not already agreed to take him, the owner may have considered euthanizing him then because, well, nobody but us wants to deal with a blind draft cross baby. But we've had several blind horses at this point, and blind cats and dogs, and blind does not bother me a bit. Now it's Keiko's turn. The first thing the vet wanted to know was, am I sure that I got all of the metal out? And I understand why she asked that, because looking at it, I would have assumed there was something still in there too. But I told her I was pretty sure, and that Keiko let me put my fingers all the way into the holes in her legs. Still, the first place to begin was an x-ray, which gratifyingly showed that I did indeed get all of the metal out. What it also showed was that on the front of her cannon, where the wire had been the tightest on the bad leg, a bone chip had come away and died and formed a sequestrum. It's a great regret of mine that we heavily sedated her and removed that bone chip before she finished the examination of the whole leg. It wasn't easy on Keiko, and I wish I could have spared her that, because what the vet found next after the removal of the bone chip was absolutely shocking. Moving around to the back of the leg and reaching into the gaping hole, she found that the flexor tendon and suspensory ligament were both completely eaten through. She shouldn't have been able to walk. She walked for me. My mind scrambled, reaching for some way to save her. I have connections in rescue, connections in the horse world with big money, and connections to the top vets in the country. I asked her owner if a rescue would take her and do the surgery at a discount. Would you surrender her? Absolutely not. Rescues exist to save horses from people who don't take good care of them. She seemed to feel like it was an insult to think that a rescue would be involved with a horse of hers, in spite of the situation that her herd of 20-some were facing. Could you patch her up well enough to get her to Ohio? If I could get her to me, I can try and rehab her at home and have surgery done at OSU or at Root and Riddle. She only has to be pasture sound. I don't care if she's rideable or even able to do anything. It just looked at me and shook her head. She's just going to be too big. If she weren't a draft cross, maybe. I looked back at her and I said, $10,000 and 6 months of pain to euthanize her anyway, huh? And the vet nodded. There wasn't really anything else to do. Her owner couldn't bear to stay with her, and honestly, I was kind of glad because she was mine. Until the very end. The hospital had a special padded stall with a wall that folded into a V shape so I could hold her head and talk to her, with no danger when they gave her first a little more sedative and then the euthanasia drugs.
I held her head as she died, and I asked her to come back to me again in another body if she could. I told her how sorry I was that I had left her and that I wasn't there. How sorry I was that I didn't find another way, that I didn't fight harder. Her passing was peaceful, a whisper of breath and an end of pain. They opened the padded wall and eased her slowly to the ground when she was gone. I was so thankful for that. Being such big animals, they fall like shattered glass. I cut a piece of mane for my camp kiddo, and I told them to keep her tail to give to her owner. The next time I came down, her owner gave it to me. I will never know if the pressure of the wire destroyed the tendons and ligaments, which means that she was already doomed before I even got her off the mountain, or if the infection run rampant ate through, which means at least in a small part, I bear responsibility. I bear responsibility for her no matter what. You are responsible forever for what you have tamed. A piece of my soul walks the next world with her. I loved her. I stayed with her until the very end. And now, all that remains of her family is Caterly. Caterly, who is so like her in appearance and so unlike her in personality. And Caterly, who has been trying to get my attention from the very beginning. I told their owner, I know what baby I want now. But it wasn't that simple. Keiko's story, Epilogue 1. What happened to Foxy and Cordeaux? When I was first working with the herd, I could not figure out why both Foxy and Cordeaux looked so bad. Many members of the herd were thin in that drought year, but they both looked bad enough to be kept in the back, because if someone saw them from the road, they might have called animal control. I finally figured out that I had been thinking that Cordeaux was the same age as the other babies I was working at the same time with him, who were 2-year-olds. But actually, Cordeaux was a yearling. And the reason his mother looks so bad is because she spent the winter up on the mountain, nursing him and keeping him alive at the expense of her own body. Even down in the small paddock, if hay was available, it was not what we would consider quality nutrition. She's had a leg injury now and is very lame and very thin. Her owner said she was planning to have her euthanized, but it kept just not quite happening, to the point that I eventually offered to bring a firearm with me on one of my trips down and euthanize her myself, which Mike and I have done, and I do believe is actually more humane than euthanasia by a veterinarian, and certainly is more humane than starving to death. I was thankful very much when I heard that my friend's son brought his gun and euthanized Foxy when he came to Thanksgiving dinner that year. She was my friend as well, and now her pain is ended, and I hope that her rest is sweet. She earned it. The owner talked to me about Cordeaux and asked me to take him, because nobody else would take a blind baby draft, and otherwise she was going to euthanize him. And we said yes, we would take him, but before we could make the arrangements to get a trailer ready and pick him up and bring him back to Ohio, my camp kid found him dead one day when she stopped by to check the herd after school. Unvaccinated, unhandled, untreated, he was too weak. I knew the first time I looked at him that he would die there on the mountain. I tried to prevent it, and I failed. He was my friend too, and now his pain is ended. And now, all that remains of Foxy in this world is Caterly. Keiko's story, Epilogue 2, Caterly. Foxy had 4 babies, and 3 of them are dead. The one that remains is 4 years old, fairly well halter broke and lunging somewhat for me. She's got about 4 rides, but the first time the camp kid tried to ride her without the horse ponying her, she freaked out and bucked the kid off. Caterly has been trying to get my attention from the beginning, to the point that I think Caterly is a pest. She has always got her nose stuck in what I'm doing, and she likes to grab the strap of my treat bag in her mouth and lift me off the ground. She comes to the gate and watches me work other horses. Aching as I was for her sister, I started to pay more attention. Before I decide if she's meant to be mine, I want to sit on her, so we tacked her up with my bareback pad. I had a talk with her about whether she was willing to carry me, and then we rode around the ring. Foxy's daughter, with Foxy's heart, but raised half by humans so that she's silly and playful and she loves the clicker. It's not just a conversation with her taking direction and doing what you say. She talks back. The last of Foxy's blood. A last great act of love by two teenagers, one of whom is also no longer with us. I expected that whatever deal I made with my friend for a baby would not be what most people would consider fair to me. I'm accustomed to giving more than I'm compensated for. What I expected was for the price to be unreasonable but the discount to be large, or for the price to be reasonable and the discount to be small. Unfortunately, I hit an unexpected snag when the price was unreasonable and the discount was also unreasonable. Let's be clear, this is a minimally started 4-year-old half Percheron, 1/4 thoroughbred, 1/4 quarter horse black filly. She has never seen a vet, she has never seen a farrier, she has no vaccination, she has had no parasite control or fecals, she has no coggins, she's never been on a trailer. She does not, thankfully, have an umbilical hernia like so many of her half-siblings do, but her father is the same registered but not high-quality, unhandled stud colt who added no real value to his get. Let us also be clear about the amount of time, effort, and money I put in. Each trip down and back cost me between $200 and $300 and 13 hours of driving. While there, I worked and handled horses from when I got up until when I went to bed. I conservatively calculate that between travel and actual handling time, I have between 100 and 150 hours into this project, and about $1,500 in actual money that it costs to drive back and forth and eat along the journeys and such. I get $50 an hour as a mobile trainer, but I never expected anything near that. I expected half price on whatever baby I chose, particularly when she gave me the list of her asking prices and they seemed very ambitious. For Caterly, she wants $7,000, and she finally gave me a number. For all of the work I had done up to that point and any work that I would do in the future, she would discount a total of $1,500 off of the baby of my choice. I had already given her a check for $500 as earnest money, so I was $2,000 into the $7,000 I would need to bring this baby home. I left last November fully intending to be back in December and to come up with a way to scrape, pinch, save, and make more money to be able to bring Caterly and my donkey friend Sweetums home with me. 2 things happened. 1, my truck transmission failed entirely and the truck no longer moves except in reverse, so I didn't have a way to go pick up babies. And 2, I completely unexpectedly ended up with emergency custody of my ex-step-granddaughter, who was only 6 weeks old at the time. Until court is done, she can't cross state lines, and I can't go back to West Virginia. I haven't been there in a year. My camp kid hasn't been there in a year. My gear, my friends are all still waiting for me, and waiting for rescue that I can't bring them. Meanwhile, life goes on, and I stay busy with my own horses and my client horses, and I keep trying to find a way. To find a way to get them safe off the mountain, to find a way to bring them home, to find a way to keep my promise. I don't know what I will find the next time I go, but I know that my time with Keiko and her family have changed me forever, and I will never give up or stop trying until all of my friends are safe and well. Someone asked their owner about me, and she said, the horses like her, and she helps with them. Someone asked my camp kid what my real job was, and she said, Christy doesn't have a real job. Christy's job is to make sure everyone is okay. I'm not sure I really did a good job of that in this situation. I'm not sure that I made a difference at all, and I'm not sure I will be able to make a difference for the ones who remain. For now, I will tell their stories. This is the story of a horse named Keiko, and this is how it ends.